Israel issues mass displacement orders demanding residents to immediately evacuate their homes. The Iranian president urges the public to trust their government. And Russia launches a massive attack on western, southern, and central Ukraine. The Israeli occupation military has issued mass displacement orders that residents of large parts of Gaza City and northern Gaza immediately evacuate their homes and move south towards the El Mawasi area. The evacuation order covers the following neighborhoods: El Zaytun, the Old City, El Turkman, El Jadida, El Tufah, El Daraj, El Sabra, Jabalia El Balad, Jabalia El Nazla, Jabalia Camp, El Rauda, El Nahda, El Zuhur, El Nur, El Salam, and Tel El Zatar. The Israeli military classified these areas as active combat zones and warned civilians that returning could result in severe consequences. And the Palestinian presidency has warned of the dangers posed by Israel's threats of forced displacement for the Gazans and the potential for a new destructive military operation. They urged the U.S. to compel Israeli authorities to cease fire and highlight that Israel's annexation policies in the West Bank lead to further conflict and instability. The Palestinian presidency added that any initiatives that do not address Palestinian rights are destined to fail. And the Palestinian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has urged the international community to fulfill its responsibilities under international law and relevant UN resolutions, particularly Resolution 2334, to stop settler violence against unarmed Palestinian civilians. The ministry called for the measures to curb attacks by settlers and their supporters, highlighting the recent coordinated violence against Palestinian communities. It emphasized the need for urgent action to dismantle extremist settler organizations and impose international sanctions. US President Donald Trump has urged an end to the war and a ceasefire. That came as the Israeli occupying military ordered Palestinians to evacuate northern Gaza ahead of intensified fighting against Hamas. The Arab mediators, including Egypt and Qatar, supported by the U.S., initiated new efforts to halt the 20-month war and secure the release of detainees. Hamas expressed the readiness for talks but insisted on specific demands. And Egypt's Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati has met the EU Special Envoy for Middle East Peace, Christophe Bigot, to discuss Egypt's mediation alongside Qatar and the US for a Gaza ceasefire, detainee exchange, and humanitarian aid. Abdelati stressed the urgent need to halt Israeli aggression, prevent Palestinian displacement, and convene a Gaza reconstruction conference, while urging the global recognition of a Palestinian state on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. At least 5 Palestinians were killed by the Israeli occupation forces while waiting for aid in northern side of the Palestinian Rafah. The incident is part of a growing pattern of violence near aid distribution centers in Gaza. And since the U.S. and Israel-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation took over aid operations in late May, over 580 Palestinians have reportedly been killed by the Israeli fire near these sites. And for more analysis, we now move to Mark Summers in our newsroom. Hello, Mark.
Thank you, Selma. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, we're now joined from Cairo by the writer and political researcher Ahmed Maharam. Thank you very much for joining us here on Qnews. So certain neighborhoods have been classified as active combat zones. This is going to be very dangerous for civilian safety, is it not?
Absolutely, it is danger. And if we'd like to find a reason why Benjamin Netanyahu and his cabinet are trying to do so, maybe for the next 2 days, he's planning to visit Washington and discuss serious kind of negotiation between him and the administration of President Trump. What happened for the last 12 days of the conflict between Israel and Iran has shows how important that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for the last 20 years has to stop. If President Trump was successfully did that in 12 days, why not he can do the same? So that's why I think Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to do more damage and more pressure and influence to the Palestinian before going to visit Washington. But I think definitely administration of President Trump are in a very, very tough situation. They have to show their citizen in America and the world how fair they are. If they have done that between Israel and Iran in 12 days, why not 20 months of that unfair conflict between both sides, Palestinian and Israeli? President Trump has to do a very important role, and I think he is willing to do it.
Now, the aid corridors have become death traps, many people say. How do we stop the killing around these aid distribution centers?
It is actually shame because for years, the UNRWA used to do a very important and tangible assistance to the Palestinians they are in need. If Israel have done tremendous effort to smash the appearance or the attendee of this UN agency and to do something different, Israel and America are trying to do the best. But actually it shows, if you can follow what the French people are talking, the Prime Minister of France is talking about 530 people dead since, this kind of responsibility was under the American forces and the Israeli troops. It is not fair. The best thing is to leave that to the UNRWA. UNRWA is the right people to do so.
And when it comes to the West Bank, how are these annexation policies contributing to the conflict? And can you see any way through this, any kind of solution on the horizon?
Well, West Bank, it shows that I think Benjamin Netanyahu for the last 20 months, he was not able to do any kind of achievement of what he was expecting to do in Gaza. So he was trying to do the same damage with the West Bank. I think both sides are his target in order that he can succeed to let the Palestinians leave the land and go somewhere else. I think the result is not against his wishes. He has to look to the future. He has to have a kind of compromise. Palestinian under all these kind of unfair treatment will not be able, and they will never leave their lands.
And many have said that they see a window of opportunity for a ceasefire in Gaza. Can you see Trump getting involved in this and it coming to fruition over the next coming days and weeks?
Could be the results of after 12 days of conflict between Iran and Israel. I think American administration are asked to do the same. If you don't succeed to stop Benjamin Netanyahu of what he is doing, it is actually shame on the American administration. I think Israel is having very tough time, and Benjamin Netanyahu is seeking the help and assistance from Trump. Trump, in this kind of period, within the next 1 week or two, is trying to save him by all means. And the top of that war, ceasefire is actually on the benefit of all the sides, starting from Israel itself.
Well, thank you very much. A pleasure as always, Ahmed Maharam, joining us from Cairo, the writer and political researcher. Thank you for joining us here on Q News. And now let's go back to Selma in the studio.
Mark, thank you very much. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot has affirmed France's determination to recognize the state of Palestine, citing the worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza as a catalyst for urgent international action. And Barrot condemned the killing of hundreds of Palestinian aid seekers by Israeli forces, describing it as a disgrace and an affront to human dignity. Barrot criticized Israel's limited aid distribution plan conducted outside the UN international oversight, during which soldiers have reportedly opened fire on Palestinians waiting for assistance and forcing civilians to choose starvation or being shot. He emphasized that France, alongside the European Union, is ready to support safe and equitable food distribution in Gaza and underscored the commitment to recognizing Palestinian statehood as part of a joint effort to establish the necessary conditions for peace. Gaza-based health authorities have announced that the death toll from the Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip has climbed to 56,500 and over 133,400 were wounded. Gaza-based health authorities have reported that Israeli military operations in Gaza had killed 8 Palestinians and injured 41 others in the past 24 hours. Injured individuals and casualties were taken to El Ahli Baptist Hospital in Gaza City following the Israeli airstrikes that targeted multiple areas. The Palestinian Ministry of Health reported numerous fatalities, including women and children, resulting from the attacks. This latest violence stems from the ongoing Israeli aggression on Gaza, which escalated in October 2023. The International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC, has warned that Gaza's healthcare system is effectively obliterated, with staff overwhelmed by relentless mass casualties as Israeli attacks persist. And according to ICRC's spokesperson in Gaza, Hisham Mahanna, no week has passed since hostilities resumed on March the 18th without reports of strikes affecting hospitals, ambulance crews, or healthcare workers, even those actively on duty. Mahanna said the hospital's resources are rapidly depleted due to both a surge in casualties and ongoing restrictions on humanitarian aid. He described the crisis as exhausting human and material resources, providing a stark illustration of the healthcare system's near total breakdown. And according to Israeli army occupation, radio violence by Israeli settlers in the occupied West Bank has surged by 30% this year. 414 nationalist crimes were recorded so far, compared to 318 during the same period last year. The incidents, based on security establishment data, include arson, stone throwing, vandalism, assaults, and other violent confrontations. A senior Israeli military official warned that not only are these crimes increasing in number, but they are also becoming more severe. The United Nations Security Council is set to hold an open session on Monday to address developments in the Middle East, with particular emphasis on the situation in Palestine. UN Assistant Secretary General for the Middle East, Asia and the Pacific, Mohammed Khalid Khiari, will brief Council members on the latest quarterly report from the UN Secretary General regarding the implementation of Resolution 2334. Adopted in December 2016, Resolution 2334 calls for an immediate halt to all Israeli settlement activities in the occupied Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem.
Iran should not escalate. To fulfill its mission of maintaining international peace and security,
trying to make a deal so that there's no destruction and death.
Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has emphasized that their priority is to maintain national unity, urging the public to trust their government. And he noted that the solidarity of the people over the past 12 days demonstrates their unwavering support for the nation. His statements came after the Iranian parliament accused external enemies of waging a psychological war to instigate fear and chaos, claiming that the U.S. is reigniting conflicts amid negotiations. And Iran's top military commander, Major General Abdulrahim Mousavi, has expressed strong skepticism over Israel's commitment to the current ceasefire, warning of a forceful response should hostilities resume. And during a phone call with the Saudi Defense Minister Khalid bin Salman Al Saud, Mousavi criticized Israel for what he described as a pattern of violating international norms, and emphasized that Iran is ready to deliver a strong response if hostilities resume. His remarks underscore rising regional tensions and the fragile nature of the ceasefire in Gaza amid long-standing mistrust between Iran and Israel. And the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, has emphasized the need for a diplomatic resolution regarding Iran's nuclear program, stating that Iran could produce enriched uranium within months despite recent attacks on its facilities. And Grossi urged all parties to engage in dialogue for a lasting solution. Meanwhile, Iran's Constitutional Council approved a plan to suspend cooperation with the IAEA, citing violations of its sovereignty by the U.S. and Israel amid ongoing military tensions. The Iranian judiciary spokesperson has announced that the Israeli attack on June the 23rd on Evin prison in Tehran resulted in the deaths of 71 individuals. And he added that the casualties included administrative staff, military personnel, detainees, and family members visiting inmates. He also noted that the attack marked a shift in Israel's targeting strategy, aiming at symbols of Iran's ruling system. He added that remaining detainees transferred to other prisons in Tehran. And overnight, Russia has launched a significant attack on the western, southern, and central Ukraine, using hundreds of drones, cruise, and ballistic missiles, injuring at least 6 individuals, including a child. And explosions were reported across various regions, including Lviv and Cherkasy, where several buildings, including a college, were damaged. The Ukrainian military stated that approximately 500 aerial weapons were deployed during the assault, impacting multiple locations. The Kremlin has warned that tougher European sanctions on Russia will inflict greater economic pain in Europe itself, as Russia has grown increasingly resilient to what it calls illegal sanctions. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov dismissed calls from Western leaders, including the French President Emmanuel Macron, suggesting sanctions would force Russia to negotiate. He described sanctions as a double-edged sword and said Russia has built resistance to their effects. That comes as the Russian President Vladimir Putin highlighted his country's economic growth rate of a 4.3% in 2024 compared to just an 0.9% in the Eurozone, arguing that further sanctions would harm Europe more than Russia. And the Russian Foreign Intelligence Director has stated that he spoke with the CIA director, agreeing to maintain ongoing communication at any time. The rivalry between their intelligence agencies has intensified, with both resorting to public campaigns to recruit agents since the onset of the Russia-Ukraine conflict in 2022. The Russian Foreign Intelligence Director confirmed their call aimed to discuss mutual interests, with their last known conversation occurring in March. And in the past 24 hours, both Russian and Ukrainian forces have engaged in significant military operations, including airstrikes and drone attacks. And Russia's Ministry of Defense reported capturing another settlement in Donetsk, marking the fifth in a week, and claimed to have targeted numerous Ukrainian military sites. Meanwhile, Ukraine conducted airstrikes on Russian warehouses and attacked the Kirvosk airfield in Crimea, destroying key military equipment. And moving on to Cairo, where Egypt has strongly condemned the terrorist attack on a military convoy in northwestern Pakistan, which resulted in casualties and injuries. And in a statement by the Foreign Ministry, Egypt reaffirms its rejection of all forms of violence, extremism and terrorism, expressing full solidarity with Pakistan during this tragic time. This statement added that the Egyptian government extends heartfelt condolences to the Pakistani government and people, as well as wishes for a speedy recovery for the injured. And in India, during a festival in the east, 3 people died and 6 were injured in a stampede, although none of the injuries were serious. The incident occurred at dawn in Puri, where thousands gathered for an annual chariot festival. Eyewitnesses attributed the stampede to a closed exit gate, forcing the crowd to use a single entry point. And in South Korea, former President Yoon Suk-yeol has attended a summon at the prosecutor's office regarding his failed attempt to impose martial law in December. Yoon's lawyers criticized the prosecutor's demands, claiming they violated his rights and aimed to humiliate him publicly. Yoon, facing a politically charged investigation, did not answer reporters' questions, but pledged to provide truthful responses during questioning. And the United States and the Group of 7 nations have agreed to support a new framework that would partially exempt the U.S. companies from certain aspects of the Global Corporate Tax Agreement. The G7 introduced a side-by-side system after the U.S. agreed to eliminate the controversial Section 899 retaliatory tax, initially introduced in President Trump's tax and spending bill. The removal of the Section 899 also spares the UK businesses from facing significant additional tax liabilities. U.S. Senate Republicans have planned to vote on U.S. President Donald Trump's extensive tax cut and spending bill after addressing concerns regarding rural hospital funding and state tax deductibility. Several previously hesitant senators expressed readiness to support the bill, which aims to extend the 2017 tax cuts and increase military and border security spending. Democrats criticized the bill for favoring the wealthy and potentially adding a $4 trillion to the national debt.
But Republicans are united in our commitment to what we're doing in this bill.
And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin, and here's what we have been covering. Israel issues mass displacement orders demanding residents to immediately evacuate their homes. The Iranian president urges the public to trust their government. And Russia launches a massive attack on the western, southern, and central Ukraine. And this concludes our news bulletin for the hour. And don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed. And thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.